The Philistines assembled their camps to war. They assembled at Sochoh, which belonged to Judah, and they encamped between Sochoh and Azekah and Ephes Dammim. Saul and the men of Israel assembled. They encamped in the valley of Terebinith. They set the battle in array against the Philistines. Philistines were standing on the mountain from here. Israel was standing on the mountain from here, and the valley was between them. And the champion emerged from the Philistines' camp named Goliath. From Gath his height was 6 cubits and a span, and a helmet of copper was on his head, and he was wearing a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat 5,000 shekels of copper. And greaves of copper were on his legs, and copper javelin was between his shoulders. And the shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and the spear's head was 600 shekels of iron. And the shield bearer went before him, and he stood and called to the array of Israel. And he said to them, "Why should you come out to wage war? Am I not the Philistine, and you the servants of Saul? Choose for yourselves a man, and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, we shall be slaves to you. If I overcome him and kill him, you shall be slaves to us and serve us." Philistine said, "I taunt the ranks of Israel this day. Give me a man and let us fight together." And Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, and they were panic-stricken and very much afraid. And David was the son of this Ephrathite man from Bethlehem of Judah, whose name was Jesse, and he had 8 sons, and the man was old in Saul's time, coming among men. Jesse's 3 eldest sons who had followed Saul went to war, and the names of his 3 sons who went to war were Eliab, the firstborn, and the second to him Abinadab, and the third Shammah. David was the youngest, and the 3 eldest followed Saul. Now David went to and fro from Saul to tend his father's sheep in Bethlehem. Philistine drew near morning and evening and presented himself 40 days, and Jesse said to David his son, "Take now to your brothers an ephah of this parched corn and 10 loaves of this bread, and rush them to the camp to your brothers. You shall bring these 10 cheeses to captain of the 1,000. You shall see how your brothers are faring. You shall take the tidings of their welfare." And Saul and they, and all the men of Israel, in the valley of the Terebinith, were at war with the Philistines. David arose early in the morning, and he left the sheep with the keeper, and he carried off and went, as Jesse had commanded him, and he came to the barricade, and the army which was going out to the battle array shouted in the battle. The Israelites and the Philistines put the battle in array, army against army. David left the baggage in the hand of the keeper of the baggage, and he ran to the battle array, and he came and greeted his brothers. While he was speaking with them, behold, a champion named Goliath, the Philistine from Gath, was coming up from the ranks of the Philistines, and he spoke the same words as before. David heard. And all the men of Israel, upon seeing the man, fled from before him and were exceedingly frightened. Men of Israel said, "Have you seen this man who is coming up? For he is coming up to taunt Israel. And it will be that the man who will kill him, the king will enrich him with great riches, and he will give him his daughter, and he will make his father's house free in Israel." David said to the men who were standing before him, saying, "What shall be done to the man who slays that Philistine and takes away reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should taunt the ranks of the living God?" And the people said to him, "So shall be done to the man who slays him." Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men, and Eliab's wrath was kindled against David. And he said, "Why have you come down? With whom have you left those few sheep in the desert? I know your impetuousness and the evil of your heart, for you have come down in order to see the war, David said, "What have I done now? Is it not but a word?" And he turned around from him toward another, and he spoke according to the same manner. The people answered according to the former matter. The words which David had spoken were heard, and they related them before Saul, and he took him. David said to Saul, "Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your bondsman will go and battle with the Philistine." Saul said to David, "You are unable to go to this Philistine to battle with him, for you are a lad, and he is a warrior since his youth." David said to Saul, "Your bondsman was a shepherd of sheep for his father, and there came a lion and also a bear, and carried off a lamb from the flock. And I went out after him and smote him, saved it from his mouth. And he arose upon me, and I took hold of his jaw, and I smote him and slew him. Both the lion and the bear has your bondsman slain. The uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them." For he taunted the armies of the living God. David said, "The Lord who saved me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will save me from the hand of this Philistine." Saul said to David, "Go, and may the Lord be with you." Saul dressed David with his garments, and he placed a copper helmet on his head, and he dressed him with a coat of mail. David girded his sword over his garments, and he did not want to go in them, for he was not accustomed. David said to Saul, "I cannot go with these, for I am not accustomed." David took them off, and he took his staff in his hand, and he chose for himself 5 smooth pebbles from the brook, and he placed them in the shepherd's bag, which he had, and in the sack, and his slingshot was in his hand, and he approached the Philistine. The Philistine was continuously drawing near to David, and the man who bore the shield was before him. The Philistine looked and saw David, and he despised him, for he was a youth and ruddy with an attractive appearance. The Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" The Philistine cursed David by his God. The Philistine said to David, "Come to me, and I shall give your flesh to the fowl of the air and to the cattle of the field." David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with sword, spear, and javelin, and I come to you with the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of all the armies of Israel, which you have taunted. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I shall slay you and take off your head, and I shall give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines this day to the fowl of the air, to the beasts of the earth, and all the earth shall know that Israel has a God. And all this assembly shall know that not with sword and javelin does the Lord save, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will deliver you into our hand." And it was when the Philistine arose and drew closer to David, that David hastened and ran to the battle array toward the Philistine. David stretched his hand into the bag, took a stone therefrom, and slung it. He hit the Philistine in the forehead, and the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the ground. David overpowered the Philistine with the slingshot and with the stone, and he smote the Philistine and slew him, and no sword was in David's hand. David ran and stood up to the Philistine, and he took his sword and drew it from its sheath, and slew him, and with it severed his head. The Philistines saw that their hero had died, and they fled. The men of Israel and Judah rose and shouted, and pursued the Philistines until you come to the valley, and until the gates of Ekron. And the slain of the Philistines fell on the road of Shaaraim, and up to Gath, and up to Ekron. The children of Israel returned from pursuing the Philistines, and all plundered their camps. David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, and his weapons he put in his tent. When Saul saw David going out toward the Philistine, he said to Abner, the general of his army, "Whose son is this youth, Abner?" And Abner said, "By your life, O king, I know not." The king said, "You ask whose son this youth is." And as David returned from slaying the Philistine, Abner called him and brought him before Saul, and the Philistine's head was in his hand. Saul said to him, "Whose son are you, young man?" David said, "The son of your bondsman Jesse, the Bethlehemite."